Bring in Aditi. Aditi,
Yep.
I don't know how long you've been on with us, but the general consensus here is it's not going to be pretty at First Energy Stadium. Although Jason believes that, the consensus is wrong. What's your 30,000 foot view of what's going to happen Sunday? What do you think?
I tend to lean a little bit more towards what Jason is saying.
Come on in, the water's warm.
Good.
Well, okay, look, Jacksonville went out to LA and did a number on the Chargers. And hello, it's time to start playing good defense. As much as you want to talk about Jacoby Brissett and whether he's going to match up with Justin Herbert, that's not the key here. This is a defense that is constructed to be amongst the NFL leaders in how you play defense, and they're not playing defense. I mean, that really has been the most, below par part of what the Browns are doing here. Run the ball, play good defense, you're at home, protect your home. And it's this whole idea of what's a winnable game and what's not a winnable game. It's funny because I just had this conversation with someone. From the outside, when I say someone, I mean an NFL player. From the outside, you might sit here and say, oh, well, those weren't great quarterbacks and this is a great quarterback. But if you're a professional athlete, if you're a professional football player, you better believe every single week when you take the field that is a winnable game. You don't get into all these conversations of, well, this is how Mitch Trubisky compares to Justin Herbert, or this is how Marcus Mariota compares to Tom Brady. You believe when you step on the field that you can win, and you should. And so this is a home game. The same way that you're saying Justin Herbert deserves all this, like, oh my goodness, he's Justin Herbert. Well, doesn't home field mean something? Doesn't that count for something?
Well, Didi, I think the people on the other side are a little apprehensive because we've seen blown coverages going back to last year. So I guess what my question is, what makes people think that that is corrected, and then that won't rear its ugly head in the fourth quarter again?
Gee, nobody's going to think that until it actually happens. I mean, that's just the reality. We can sit here and talk as much as we want. We can say we believe in this secondary, or we don't believe in this secondary. At the end of the day, those are the guys that are taking the field. It's time to put up. Like, that's it. That's what I'm saying. You're 4 games into the season. You're a quarter of the way. Basically, how do you divide 17 by 4? Like, what is it like?
It's
the
a pain
end of the
butt,
first
Aditi.
quarter?
It makes no sense.
Yeah, at the first quarter, you'll be at the quarter
Yes,
bowl.
that's exactly it. After the first quarter.
Right. It'll officially be a quarter of the way to this season.
Right.
We make all sorts of excuses early in the year. Okay, well, training camp is not the same. There's no more two-a-days. This is why tackling is awful. This is why quarterbacks and receivers need to kind of iron out their chemistry because they never actually play together in the preseason. We do all of that for the first month of the season. Okay, the first month is over. Now is the time to play like the contender that you are constructed to be. And we've talked about Myles Garrett and we've talked about Jadeveon Clowney and that nobody foresees this. But hey, there was a year where Tom Brady didn't play for the Patriots, and what did the Patriots do with Matt Castle? There was a year that Ben Roethlisberger was out and the Steelers nearly went to the playoffs with Duck Hodges. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you get to suit up the same number of guys, show up. Like, that's it. I just feel at this point, it's time for this defense to show up, and you're at home and you have the crowd behind you. You can't just sit here and tread water until Deshaun Watson shows up.
Well, let me say, Aditi, I agree with you in theory, right? That's how
in
it should
theory.
work. It's how it should work. But the reality of it is, when you talk about home, right? There's some places that you don't fear going into the place because it's not a tough place to play. Until you establish that, like you go to Three Rivers, well, it's not Three Rivers in Heinz Field. That's a tough place.
Not even
Not
Heinz
Heinz
Field.
Field anymore.
That's a tough place.
Right,
It's a tough place.
That
right?
place in Pittsburgh.
And so I would just tell you that, in theory, right, they should be stepping up because you're 4 games of the season. Here's the deal: step up and be a pro, right? Well, guess what? If you got mismatch as players, they might not have the talent to do that, right? Because what I saw last week was I saw a team get bull rushed, stampeded on up front. I can't win anything like that.
Agreed.
Until that gets corrected, right? Until it gets corrected, you're going to have nothing, right? And I think the people on my side of it who are looking at it from the outside, because I'm just an NBA guy, right? But I'm not stupid, right? There's certain things that happen in sports that are consistently have to be done in order to win. And when I don't see that, I don't care what sport you're in, what profession you're in, you're going to struggle. And what I see right now, until the things get corrected over there, right, till you call a spade, you're going to be a 500 or just below 500 team. This is where we're headed to, right? But I don't see that. It's just like the defensive front. The Togiai and them up front, that ain't going to happen, right? No. Go get me somebody, because it's a problem. It's putting pressure on the other people. My linebackers are light. They're light, right? You let a guy off the practice squad run you down the field in Atlanta last Sunday. So what did we do this week to correct it? That's where that's where my issue is. Will we make the steps necessary, do the things necessary to change the tide of this team? If we don't, 500, less than 500.
So much of this is just mentality, and it doesn't matter if it's basketball. Go ask the Detroit Pistons back of your generation. Or go talk to Pat
You
Riley.
talking to a Piston? You talking to a Piston?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Talk to the Pistons. Talk to Pat Riley, who had the Knicks. There's a level of physicality that you need no matter what the sport is. I agree with you. And sometimes the way that you play up front is all about a mindset. Yeah. I also completely, totally agree with you. I want to say something about home, though.
Yeah.
First Energy Stadium has all of the ingredients to be one of the toughest home environments. That is a ridiculously loyal and rabid and loud fan base. The winds that swirl there, the environment there that is so unpredictable. That should be one of the toughest places to play in the NFL. It's a travesty that it hasn't been. So much of that has had to do with the players that were on the field. Well, now you don't have that excuse. This should be a tough place to play. This should be a home that is defended. But I completely agree with you on the physicality, and I agree with you about the line. And this is what we talked about with the defensive tackles in camp, that it was a young group, but that they seemed to have that hard-nosed mentality, that they were hungry, that they were physical. You're right. Let's see more of it. You shouldn't be letting people run on you. I don't care.
Especially backups.
She's spot on, right? But it requires at some point somebody take control of the reins, right? This is where we are, and I'm not one for making excuses for people.
You wanted them to go out and get Ndamukong Suh this week, didn't you?
Here, I'm gonna give you just a quick line. You got some people on the team that couldn't play dead at a funeral. Seriously. They couldn't play dead at a funeral.
When you running up and down the field, I don't see. Now, everybody doesn't have to be a rah-rah guy. Everybody don't got to drive through a fence. But you got to have at least one. I don't see one person, not from the coaching staff, that's animated. I don't see nobody on the defense that when they give it a place that's animated. I don't see nothing. Nobody is in anybody's face.
Brad, does the team need that fire? When you were in the NBA, when your teams were winning and you were on a lot of winning teams, was that a necessary component to being successful? The guy that would stand up and get everybody's attention when the building was on fire.
It's an integral part of winning. You have to have people like that. Period. I don't care. Listen, this is not a nice business. It's just not, right? You have to have some. So in Chicago, Charles Oakley. In Detroit, Isaiah Thomas and Bill Laimbeer.
Udonis has them right now for the Heat.
You saw what he told Jimmy Butler last year when Jimmy Butler was acting a fool on the sideline. I will whoop your butt right here during the game. Facts, right? You have to have that.
Got to.
And I'm not saying that it's not occurring there.
We're not seeing it.
We're not seeing it, and it's not translating out on the field.
I think that's the best point Tyvis made yesterday, was there was nobody on that defense. When they were getting their ass whipped by the Falcons on that drive, there was nobody out there who could go, all right, come here. What are we doing? What is going on? Somebody put their foot in the ground right now and make a play. And I think it was probably because of the fact that all the guys that they were missing up front that we were talking about, Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, Anthony Walker's a huge loss that seems to get overshadowed with some of the other guys. So who is that guy? Who's that guy who's going to emerge and say, this cannot happen again?
Jason, I just, to Dee Dee's point, I just thought about something. You always have to have a guy, you know who that guy is? The guy that's willing to fight you right there on the spot, right?
You know who comes to mind for me? Steve Smith. Remember Steve Smith when he was
with Carolina?
No, Dee.
Hold on. I saw it last night. Did you see what happened last night in Golden State?
Yeah.
Draymond
said, I'm going to whoop you, Jordan Poole, right here. Yeah. Yes, I am. Now, I'm going to do you right here.
Dee, how many, you go back to your Pittsburgh days, they had like 5 of them.
Oh, my God.
They had 5 guys. Harrison, Joey Porter, they had all these guys. Cam Hayward is still one of them dudes. They got 5 or 6 of them. Do you see any of those comparable players over? They not as innovative as they was in Pittsburgh.
You know, it's funny because that was a point of conversation maybe a year ago, that maybe the Steelers didn't have the same nasty. They didn't have the same edge that they did at some point. But I mean, Cam Hayward is a guy. It's funny. I was with Chris Wormley, who plays defensive end for the Steelers last night. And we were exactly talking about this, how in this charity softball game, Cam Hayward wouldn't let me run to first base. I mean, he literally elbowed me out of the way so I couldn't beat out this grounder. And Wormley says to me, I mean, it's a great story. I hit this weak grounder to short. Kenny Pickett's playing short. Kenny tries to do me a solid and throws the ball behind his back, pulls Cam Hayward off of first base just so I could get there. And Cam races to get the ball, then elbows me out of the way to get to first base before me. And I'm telling this story to Wormley, and Wormley goes, you know, I think that Cam would do the same thing to his 3-year-old daughter. I think he would do the same thing to his mother. And there are guys like that. I mean, I think about Antonio Brown having 3 Ravens tackling him on Christmas Day short of the goal line. Yeah. Antonio Brown ran over every single one of them, including Eric Weddle, to get in that end zone. And it was, he'd run over his own mother to get in the end zone. Who on the Browns can you say that about right now? Who's got that competitiveness?
So, Aditi, I see the same thing you see. So you have a guy that's out on the free agent market, that's out here sitting in a... And Ndamukong Suh is a nasty dude. Just follow him. He's a nasty dude, right? We need a nasty here. We do.
No, you're right.
It's not going to be J.O.K. No. It's not going to be Phillips.
It's that famous video from the college coach who was telling the media, we need more dogs in here. Yeah. we need more dogs.
You know, and I'll give you Jay. I'll give you something else because it's interesting. Robert Saleh with the Jets has been very, very honest about that one of the things that he felt when he came in was that he needed a roster of, to your point, dogs, guys that love the game of football, guys that are ridiculously competitive about the game of football, and that has been part of the process is getting a mindset in there, a collective mindset. And so to what you're saying, you know, this is kind of, it's funny because this is an argument I've sort of had, I hate to say with Mike Tomlin because Mike Tomlin doesn't waste time arguing with me, but that I've kind of like publicly said, Mike Tomlin and the Steelers don't like to bring in veterans that are on a 3rd contract. Right? Like they like young players. They like their own. They want to grow and develop their own. And then maybe they'll sign somebody who's on their 2nd contract. They don't like older guys. And I remember when I first came into Pittsburgh, the Steelers were 8-8. They were 8-8. What I felt was missing was that veteran leadership. And a few years later, I remember talking about this with Keith Butler, the defensive coordinator, that they needed a Thomas Davis, that they needed a guy who maybe wasn't playing at the same level as he once did, but he brought a professionalism, an attitude, a nasty to the locker room and taught younger guys. And so maybe I can't give you 60 snaps. It's like the Ravens bringing in Jason Pierre-Paul. They don't want 60 snaps out of him, but they want 25, and they want all the other stuff that he brings. And so I think I agree with you. I think there's an argument to be made there that a roster construction isn't only about the 53 most talented guys that you can get. That sometimes it's about getting the guy that only gives you the 20, 25 snaps, but gives you so much more in the lunchroom and the locker room.
So, Aditi,
but I'll
to
also
that point,
tell you, I've had lots of coaches who make way more money than me and that are obviously the experts at this disagree. I mean, it seems obvious to me. It seems obvious to you, obviously. But
earlier this week, too, you made the point that, you know, sometimes we get it wrong when we're on the outside. And we do have to say, we don't know what's going on. There might be 5 dogs in there that stand up at halftime and scream and yell and shout. At the end of the day, we're just not seeing it. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, and it doesn't mean that every team has to have one of those. But Ndamukong Suh is a guy who's out there, who's been linked to the Browns, who plays a position that we are woefully weak at. Are you hearing anything at all in terms of discussions about bringing this guy in? And that is a guy, by the way, that is dog to the core.
You know, I have to be honest with you. I haven't even checked in on that. So I hate to sit here and act like, oh, I have or oh, I haven't, because I truly haven't checked in. But to your point, we don't know what his health status is. It's not at all that the Browns are afraid to make moves. We know that this is, I mean, look at how quickly they picked up Pharaoh Brown. And they are so deep at tight end and feel so good about their tight end room. So Andrew Berry's never been afraid of doing something like that. There may be more at play than we are privy to. We don't know. You know, oftentimes, too, I'll tell you this, a veteran might want to play, but he doesn't want to play for less than X amount of money.
Yeah,
Sure.
And
Right.
I've had
That's
this
possible.
conversation with many players
true.
who think that they can still play, but I'm not signing for less than $6 million. I'm
However-
not signing whatever that number is. So there could be some of that at play as well. I just, the fine line, and this is another one that I'll, again, because I had this opportunity to talk to Chris Wormley of the Steelers yesterday, outside, whether it's the media or the fans in the city of Pittsburgh, they think the sky is falling. Like, oh my gosh, this is the worst offense ever, and oh my gosh, this is terrible, and oh my gosh, this. Chris Wormley was like, we are literally this close. Like, we are so close to getting it right. And how many times have you heard a coach say, it is a fine, fine line between winning and losing, or it is a game of inches? And I know that they sound like cliches, but it really, truly is. Sometimes that's all it is. It's 1 inch, it's 1 foot getting in bounds. It's one player running as crisp a route as possible or cutting it off a foot short. I mean, it's sometimes something that small. So even though it's not sexy when Jacoby Brissett says it's about execution, sometimes it really is.
Yeah, I know.
And
Didi,
it's
I
just
agree with that.
one moment.
But at the same
Sorry.
time, we're living in a world where almost half the league is 2-2, and every one of those 2-2 teams can point to 1 or 2 plays in their 2 losses and say, if we're 4-0. So yeah, it is a fine line between 1-3 and 3-1. But the fact of the matter is, the 1-3s haven't consistently made those plays, and the 3-1s have. We got to wrap. Before I do, I want your thought on something. Okay. This is really sad. Adam the Bull sent this to us this morning. This is a tweet he saw on Twitter. Okay. Want to hear a sad Bears fact? Tom Brady has 23,996 career passing yards, 174 touchdowns in his 40s alone. That's 500 more yards and 20 more touchdowns than the Bears' all-time passing leader, Jay Cutler. Tom Brady, playing only in his 40s, would be the Bears' leading passer in team history. And here's the sad part, Aditi. That is awful for the Bears. But I looked it up, and he would also be the leader in yards and touchdowns for our Cleveland Browns. In his 40s, Tom Brady has accomplished more than any quarterback in the history of the Cleveland Browns. Wow.
Okay, so 2 points to that. 40s are a golden age. I think it's lovely.
I'm enjoying my 40s.
In your 40s. Thank you very much. But the other piece to that is, I bet Tom Brady right now would like his marriage to be intact rather than being the Browns or the Bears passing leader.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on that.
I don't know, man.
Don't get me started on that.
You talk about Cam Hayward knocking his 3-year-old out of the way if he had to win a softball game. Tom Brady's wired differently than anybody I've ever known.
I was the only one on the set who said, go home and be a dad, man. There's nothing else for you to accomplish.
Hey.
Just go home. Go home.
Yeah.
Here's the
Seriously, and I think that that's one of the big things. No matter how much professional success you attain, at the end of the day, it's the people that you say goodnight to. It's your family. It's your home. That's your legacy.
I'm with you.
Kids, your family, your partner, and it just ultimately at the end of the day counts for so much more. And I think that Tom Brady gets that. I really do. When we heard him very, very honestly at training camp say, I'm 45 years old. There's just a lot of
Going on.
Like how many of us felt that?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I've always really, really enjoyed him. I've enjoyed every interaction I had with Giselle. Maybe there's a lot of smoke. We obviously don't know what's fully, truly going on, but I just wish them the best, obviously.
As we all do. And you make some great points. Didi, thanks. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Yep, we'll see you next
Didi.
week.
I like what